And the South African government and refugee advocates are rebuking the Trump administration for welcoming 59 white South Africans as refugees. The president told...
I love this story. I do have to mention a couple things here, okay? I briefly talked about this. I briefly talked about this like yesterday and day prior. Number one, I don't care that we are bringing in, white farmers from South Africa. Okay, I think it's so marginal. It's so silly. It's not significant. I do, however, know exactly why the administration is doing this. It's to basically give a nod to the white nationalists to say, like, yeah, white genocide is happening. Hasan is kind of a monster now. I used to relate to the, mid-30s gamer loner dude. You can call him Mr. Reasonable, but you still, like, at least think about stuff. And, now he's just corrupt. I feel like maybe it's just like that all alone now. It's okay to be such a monster. I don't know. So, as a South African, I find it so funny because the only thing those people are running away from is the rant here. Yeah, so what's really funny about this also is that white people in South Africa live a pretty fucking good life. As opposed to the experiences that they will enjoy here in the United States of America with no social safety nets whatsoever and an affordability crisis that they're now facing. I think it's really funny, and they will most likely turn back and go to South Africa. Okay. So that's one part. That's one part of this. Okay. They'll go back to the genocidal state of South Africa that's doing a white genocide, right? Like if we were to take it seriously. A couple points to touch on here. One, white genocide is not real. It's not happening. It's not happening in South Africa. It's just a fucking white nationalist dog whistle. It's bullshit. Okay? It's not real at all. It's so not real that like Elon Musk seemingly tried to change the output of Grok, it's his own AI on Twitter, to say otherwise, and completely bricked his own AI and had to stop it for a little bit yesterday when people fucking figured it out. It's just, why are you okay with appeasing white nationalist policy? Stop being okay with bad policy because it's small. No, because I think in the grand scheme of things, this is utterly irrelevant. I think that the real vector of harm here is not bringing in a bunch of fucking inbred boars from South Africa that are going to have a shitty time in the United States of America as a way to posture towards white nationalists and as a way to legitimize claims that are being made about white genocide happening in South Africa, when the government is also blackbacking immigrants at every, from every avenue here and shipping them off to a fucking slave labor colony. That's why. You're wrong, mate. So wrong. Yeah, I know. I'm wrong. It's real. White genocide is real in South Africa, and also every single person that presents this will immediately get incredibly racist and go, it's going to turn into Zimbabwe. What is this? Oh, shit. What does this mean? Moiti uppity runs away racistly. Yeah, chatters here have to accept that there's a difference between small and significant and truly inconsequential. This is absolutely changing nothing here in America. It's changing nothing in South Africa either. It's just a performative move to offer red meat to the fucking white nationalists, okay? The far more consequential immigration enforcement agenda here is happening at the point of detention and refusing due process.
Democracy depends
Here.
on a free press. Please support our
Here,
independent
let's start
journalism at
with
the
democracy
United
now.
States Monday after being granted refugee status. Afrikaners are the white South Africans who ruled the country during apartheid. This comes as the Trump administration has suspended refugee resettlement for almost everyone else in the world. Speaking Monday, Trump claimed white South Africans.
I guess the you're wrong argument is about accepting racist Afrikaners. Like, yeah, it's performative, but I guess it can be used to have a point of reference on immigration that the U.S. considers acceptable and challenge it on race discrimination grounds. Oh no, I'm gonna bring that up. Hold on, I'm gonna get to it. I'm saying in the grand scheme of things, it's ultimately utterly inconsequential. But what is actually consequential about it is what the government is signaling. Okay, that's it.
Face racial discrimination, even though the country's white minority still owns the vast majority of farmland decades after the end of apartheid rule. Trump said he's...
Look at these boars, they're cheeseburger hogs already. No, they are so perfect. When the Trump administration has unique moments of honesty, well, I guess it's not so unique. They're openly racist usually. And say things like, well, these guys actually are the exact kind of refugees that we want in this country because they are, they're perfectly accepting of American culture. They're not wrong. It's just more so a self-own when you say that. Yeah, they brought in dudes that are virtually indistinguishable from the racist American fat hogs that you see at Walmart on a regular basis. Their opinions also resemble the racist, heart-diseased Amerifats. So it's perfect. It's perfect in that regard. You know? It's an indictment on American culture, not an indictment on anything else.
He's allowing them to come to the United States to escape, quote, genocide.
It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me, but white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
On Monday, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa refuted Trump's claims that white people are being persecuted in his country, calling it, quote, a completely false narrative. On Tuesday, Ramaphosa recounted a conversation he'd had with Trump about the situation in his country.
I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation out of the diverse groupings that we have in South Africa. We're the only country on the continent where the colonizers came to stay, and we have never driven them out of our country. So they are staying, and they're making great progress. It's a fringe grouping that does not have a lot of support, that is anti-transformation and anti-change, that would actually prefer to see South Africa going back to apartheid type of policies.
This comes as South African-born Trump advisor and multi-billionaire Elon Musk has also accused South Africa's government of promoting what he calls white genocide. Musk's grandfather moved his family to South Africa after embracing the country's apartheid system.
On Wednesday, Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot, Grok, became a trending topic on X when people tried to use it to answer questions and check facts. And the chatbot
You don't think this was an Elon request? No, I think it is. It certainly is. Sounds like something a president committing white genocide would say. Dude, if the impact of white genocide is that white people own 90% of the land, wow, dude. What an incredible version of white genocide. Like, Hold on. Doors open. It's so, yeah. Famously, that's what happened during the Holocaust, right? Or the Armenian genocide. I was memeing, bro. Please don't put me on blast. Like, even in the aftermath of the dissolution of the apartheid, you know, whites in South Africa still own like fucking 90% of the most valuable land in South Africa and 75% of all farmland.
Added the topic of white genocide in South Africa to its responses, telling users it was, quote, instructed by my creators to accept the genocide, quote, as real and racially motivated, no matter what the question was. For more, we're joined in Cape Town, South Africa by two guests. Herman Wasserman is with us, professor of journalism, director of the Center for Information Integrity in Africa at Stella.
Does he know that he's under threat? Maybe he's saying... Maybe he's saying there's no genocide because he's under threat. There's a gun pointed at him. As a white guy in South Africa, does this guy not know?
Stellenbosch University. His new piece for the website Africa is a Country is headlined Trump's Fake Refugees. Wasserman himself is a white South African, an Afrikaner. And Andile Zulu is a political analyst with the Alternative Information and Development Center. His new piece for the website Africa is a Country is titled Race, Power, and the Politics of Distraction. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Herman Wasserman, let's begin with you. You are a white South African and you are an Afrikaner. If you can explain, first of all, to the world what exactly that means and what you thought when you heard President Trump charge white genocide in South Africa.
Well, I would say that my first response was one of incredulity, and later met with, I think with disgust even, and just rejection of this notion of a white genocide or whites being persecuted. And I think that view is shared by many others, white South Africans, and certainly the majority of South Africans in the country.
Well, Andile Zulu, if you could also respond to these claims of a white genocide in South Africa and Trump bringing over these 59 Afrikaners to the U.S., and talk about this in the context of this the new law that replaces the 1975 Expropriation Act in South Africa, and explain why that's been so controversial and what it entails.
Well, this accusation of white genocide emanating from the White House is a conspiracy theory and a myth that has been floating around echo chambers of right-wing populists and white nationalists for many decades now, particularly within the online space. And it essentially holds the accusation that white South Africa...
This is literally Lauren Southern shit. Like, things that under Trump 1, neo-Nazis were, narratives that neo-Nazis were trying to advance under the first Trump term have now become official state-sanctioned policy, which of course is incredibly scary in its own right and should not be cast aside. It's just that, like, the impact of said policy is utterly inconsequential, but that doesn't mean that this isn't the state trying to legitimize a completely made up white nationalist conspiracy. And it's particularly insane to do it at a time when the American state is doing a genocide in Gaza. They are responsible for a real genocide in Gaza right now. Part of this also, this is twofold. Part of it is to also punish the state that actually called into question America's vehicle of doing genocide in Gaza. South Africa, as you guys know, launched the international a criminal justice court case against Israel conducting a genocide. So this is supposed to be like some kind of know you at the global stage from the United States of America, utilizing the influence that it, or the remaining influence that it has on the international stage. But of course, I don't think it's consequential or serious because no one believes this bullshit. The only people that believe this bullshit are motivated to believe this bullshit because they themselves are fucking white nationalists. That's it.
Africans, in particular Afrikaans South Africans, are victims of deliberate, direct, state-sanctioned violence. And anyone who lives in this country, who's awake to the reality of this country, the inequality, the poverty, the unemployment that most Black South Africans have to endure, and including Indian and colored South Africans as well, knows that it's patently untrue. And the truth, however, is irrelevant to those who are perpetuating this myth. What matters is that it's a means through which you can mobilize anxiety, mobilize fear, and mobilize frustration from a segment, I think a relatively small segment of the population that is dissatisfied with the post-apartheid democracy and the loss of their political elevated status. It's a way in which you can mobilize fears here in South Africa and then appeal to a base within the MAGA movement in the US as well to portray the Donald Trump presidency as essentially being a crusader to defend white civilization, both in the USA and here. And this all began initially with the signing by the president, Ramaphosa, of the Expropriation Act, which in itself is not that much of a radical or progressive policy. It's a very procedural piece of legislation, which essentially changes the criteria through which government can expropriate private property for the public good and for the public use on the basis of finding just and equitable compensation. And in fact, most legal experts have said that the instances in which you'll arrive at nil compensation, at no compensation, would be quite rare, actually. So this legislation isn't an assault on white livelihoods. It isn't even an attack on the dominance of private property relations in post-apartheid. But for Elon Musk and for Donald Trump, it's doing what right-wing populism, what racial ideologies always function to do, which is to stoke fear, conflict, and division in order to be able to protect the exploitative and unequal relations under South Africa's neoliberal capitalism, and I think under the neoliberal order that we have more broadly.
Yeah. The biggest L in post-apartheid South Africa was dropping the revolutionary socialist principles that the ANC operated off of, that did not engage in restorative justice when it came to the economic inequalities. And these economic inequalities persisted in South Africa, which created a de facto apartheid state from the basis of the improvement of Black people's lives in South Africa. There was no economic change. Now, of course, there's reasons for why this didn't happen. Obviously, they were like, come on, we gave you your fucking rights. Shut the fuck up. America is no stranger to undermining Reconstruction, considering that they undermined America, the federal government undermined its own efforts of finding a peaceable solution to the system of slavery that existed, this chattel slavery that existed, and very quickly took on efforts to restore the previous racial hierarchies by unleashing the Klan, for example, and destroying any kind of economic restitution opportunities for Black people that were newly freed. So a similar issue took place in post-apartheid South Africa.
I mean, I just want to add these a couple of things that I wanted to say earlier, which is to clarify for audiences who aren't as aware of South Africa's history. It was in a 1913 law that gave over 90% of South Africa's land to whites. Today, they are some 7% of the population are white South Africans, but they still own about half, 50% of the country's land. Afrikaners, who constitute the majority of the white population, are among, of course, the most successful and richest in South Africa. So if you could explain, Andile, how has this news, Trump's statement, the fact that these 59 people have now arrived,
post-apartheid South African conditions for black people and white people resembles America so perfectly, because if I'm not mistaken, I think like every single person that was the wealthiest in South Africa in apartheid South Africa were white, and then post-apartheid South Africa there was one black guy, and then the rest are still white. And the material circumstances of black South Africans did not change. Like, they had more civil liberties, but ultimately they were still living in dire poverty. So all it did was uplift, I guess, one dude, and then that's it. And I don't mean literally only one guy, but it basically creates this notion. It creates this false reality that the end of the apartheid brought about complete black liberation, where, yeah, sure, some black people were now allowed to be elevated into the capital owning class, and yet the same system of discrimination changed hands from direct de jure discrimination of black people to a de facto discrimination of black people from the point of class.
in the U.S. How has that been received in South Africa, this news?
I think it's been a mixture of frustration and bewilderment and just real confusion as to what is the basis of the idea that white South Africans, in particular Afrikaners, are being persecuted. And as you said, South Africa in the post-apartheid, the past 30 years of democracy that we have, comes out of a history of a white supremacist regime, which not only dispossessed people of color of their land, but also then set up a rigorous economic system of exploitation to ensure the underdevelopment of Black people, Indians and coloreds included, to be able to amass economic and political power. Now, if you just look, for example, at the statistics that we have on the racial manifestations of inequality in this country, it's quite clear that this myth of white genocide and of white persecution has no basis in reality. For example, the unemployment rate amongst white South Africans sits at 7.9%. As
why are they mad white people are leaving? White supremacists are leaving? They're not. I'm not. They're mad that the American government is literally lying about a fucking white genocide taking place in South Africa. That's it. This person is here to correct the record.
As compared to 36.9% for Black South Africans. The poverty rate for white South Africans sits at 1% as compared to 64% for South Africans. And in fact, the people who are the victims of violence by and large due to organized crime and due to the symptoms of societal dysfunction are largely young Black men and young Black women. If you are a young Black person in the place where I live, in Cape Town, and you live in a township in a rural area, you are 16 times more likely to be a victim of homicide as compared to a white South African. But however, it's just important to clarify that white South Africans, of course, because we are all living in a country that has many issues and many crises, are still, of course, victims of violent crime, of state dysfunction, of economic anxiety and of financial precarity, but they are not victims of those things but because they are white. those issues are a symptom of a larger dysfunction due to an incapacitated state run by kleptocrats trying to enforce neoliberalism on an increasingly dysfunctional economy. So it's quite important to say that the myth of white genocide has no basis in reality. However, South Africa is facing crises, the three crises of mass unemployment, of inequality, and of poverty. And those results from the choices, the bad policy choices that the ANC has made since 1996, which is essentially an abiding commitment to neoliberal policy, the kinds of policies which are causing the crises that we see in the United States and in many parts of the world as well.
I wanted to go back to Professor Herman Wasserman. Here in the United States, powerful group of men around Trump, known often as the PayPal Mafia, co-founders and members of PayPal, extend to apartheid South Africa. Its members, Elon Musk, co-founder of PayPal with Peter Thiel, along with David Sachs and Roelof Botha. So you have this situation where most refugees in the world are not allowed into the United States right now, where refugees are being thrown out of the United States. But you have this group on Monday of 59 white South African Afrikaners arriving in the United States after being granted refugee status. Can you talk about this small group around Trump and what they mean for Trump's worldview right now and what it means that these refugees are brought here? Did it get much attention in South Africa? I shouldn't say refugees, but these white South African Afrikaners.
Yes, I think many South African media outlets refer to these refugees in inverted commas because I think that is the general understanding that they are not really refugees. As you have pointed out, it flies in the face of the really dire and tragic circumstances that many people around the world live under, and that would be much more eligible for refugee status. In fact, as Andile has pointed out, this whole refugee status is based on disinformation. It's based on a disinformation campaign. And so some of it, it's hard, of course, to pinpoint exactly what happened first. And one could argue that some of these white former South Africans around Donald Trump would have had his ear and would have maybe helped him tapped into this sort of narrative of white persecution. They also represent to him maybe white South Africans who have left the country and have sought their fortunes elsewhere. And but I think what is also important to recognize is that this has also been the result of a concerted effort by some Afrikaner lobby groups over many years to fan that idea that South African, white South Africans, especially Afrikaners, are being persecuted. There have been a consistent campaign by the Afrikaner rights group AfriForum, who have been pushing that narrative for many years. They have lobbied Washington. They have met Republican officials. They've appeared on conservative media outlets like the Tucker Carlson show. They've extended their road shows to conservative think tanks and conferences in Europe, like CPAC in Hungary. And in all these places, they painted a dire picture of South Africa, where white farmers are supposedly under constant attack, where they're singled out for violence. They are on the verge of losing their land, that they are unfairly being targeted by a corrupt and totalitarian government which discriminates against them in what they would call a type of reverse apartheid. And all of this was very deftly wrapped up in a communication strategy that then eventually found sympathetic ears among US conservatives. And I think with these men around white, former South Africans around Trump, which would have amplified that to him. And now with this so-called refugee campaign, their communication campaign over these many years, their lobbying has finally paid off. I think in terms of the South African media, there have been a range of responses, but I think by and large, people recognize that this has no basis in reality. As Andile said, this is based on a disinformation campaign. Some of the conservative elements in the society might find that now somebody has listened to their complaints and taken that seriously. But anybody who really has their basis in factual reality would know that this is a ruse, that this is a disinformation campaign, and that actually these little group of so-called refugees are pawns in a much larger political campaign, a campaign both domestically in the US, where Trump is using them as, as really as pawns, as props in a campaign that purports to promote whiteness and whiteness under threat. And also geopolitically, in his executive order, which granted this refugee status to Afrikaners, it was juxtaposed very closely with criticism of South Africa for taking Israel to the ICJ. So this can clearly...
Dude, it's fucking nuts. I feel like Israeli interests are so pervasive in every orifice of American policy, especially foreign policy. And sometimes I feel like I'm going crazy when analyzing these situations. Like, as I told you, this guy is right. The reason why they're doing this is partially because the reason why send ANC to Mars, Elon, thank you, Trump, no to Lind and property expropriation with their compensation. Please stop legalize racism. Send ANC to Mars.
Also be seen as a message to South Africa to punish them for their stance on Israel and Israel's war on Gaza and the US's involvement and support of that war. So I think one has to understand that this is, although this group of Afrikaners might be the tokens, might be the people propped up in front of the cameras in this media event, that they are actually pawns and props in a much larger domestic and political campaign for Trump, and also domestically in South Africa for a group of Afrikaners who actually do not have any intention to leave. AfriForum and these groups said that they do not want to leave. In other words, this is really a power play for them domestically as well, to force the South African government to take their complaints more seriously, to take their claims to privilege more seriously. So it is not really about that group of 49 or however many refugees.
And of course, the U.S. threw out the South African ambassador to the United States as well, as President Trump goes after universities that talk about structural and historical racism in the United States. Herman Wasserman, I want to thank you for being.
So, yeah, we got a shipment of racist-ass token whites, self-selected. I'm going to talk about one of them. Charles Kleinhaus. Don't worry. I'm going to talk about the anti-Semitic one. Hold on. But let's watch this report, and then I'll get to that.
Told reporters Monday he admitted the refugees because of the, quote, genocide that's taking place. South Africa recently passed a new expropriation act which aims to address historical land injustices established during apartheid. Now, South Africa's government strongly disputes Trump's characterization, saying there is no persecution of white Afrikaners in his country. Let's bring in Professor Ruth Hall from the University of Western Cape in South Africa for more on this. Professor Hall, thanks for joining us. Can you just start by explaining the Expropriation Act, what it does, and why it's so controversial?
Thanks, Diane. So the Expropriation Act in South Africa has been long in coming. It's provided for in the Constitution, and it's been nearly 30 years of drafting this law. It does not provide for confiscation of land. What it does is it allows for a legal process reviewable by courts by which the state may compulsorily acquire property for certain purposes, including to restore that property to people from whom it was unfairly and unjustly taken in the past. In fact, it's the right of eminent domain. It's the same right that's enshrined.
Dude, you know what's really funny about this? Like, Americans literally think, like, after a system of denying black people any opportunities to elevate their status for upward social mobility through systematic discrimination, Americans lose their minds, not even at reparations. That's not even a point of fucking conversation at this point, but even affirmative action. So when a state is actually engaging in the act of distribution, which is a long time coming. It's constitutionally protected redistribution. They lose their fucking minds, dude. I mean, we're talking about a group of people that would rather die than allow any sort of reparations to take place for Black Americans. So yeah, this is not only just, but it's also legal. Louis Theroux has an incredible documentary about this, worth a watch maybe. Sure, we can do that.
In the American Constitution, in the Fifth Amendment. So in fact, it's quite a standard practice around the world that states have a right of eminent domain. What's striking here is that a legal process and a democratic state has established this right in law in South Africa. It is comparable to similar legislation around the world, and it has not yet been used. So it's entirely incorrect when President Trump characterizes this as a process of stealing land from white people or confiscating land. So there's a serious problem of misrepresentation of what the law is actually for. And I think that this has fed into a response in which an attempt to start to take steps towards redressing racial inequality.
Wait, the people saying this is the bare minimum and whites are losing their minds, that's not even correct. As far as I understand, even most white South Africans don't give a shit about this. This is a select few white South Africans that are the farm owners. Like, it's a handful. It is a marginal movement that has turned into this, like even fucking right-wing South Africans, I don't think, or right-wing South Africans care that much. Like, they don't, this is just like a tiny, minuscule, incredibly small, very fringe group of people. I'm not saying this to defend white South Africans at all, even though, you know, Lil Bear's in the chat. It's like, it's just, how do I describe it? It's like such a tiny percentage. It's not even the same as like, you know, the initiatives against like Cubans after the Cuban Revolution. It's not even comparable because the numbers were far larger even after the Cuban Revolution of people that had experienced discontent. Because the Cuban Revolution was a full-blown revolution, whereas the South African abolition of apartheid was not. That's precisely the reason why for 30 fucking years they've been trying to enforce the constitutional rights afforded to Black South Africans in the aftermath of the dissolution of the apartheid. You're saying it's a class issue masquerading as racial injustice, which is the oldest trick in the book? Yes, but even then, I think this moment of recognition from the American state is perhaps the biggest opportunity for this movement to grow, because up until this moment, it was just relegated exclusively to white nationalist neo-Nazis trying to create this notion that like white genocide was taking place.
From colonialism and from apartheid is seen as unfair discrimination. This is a narrative that has been promoted around this issue.
You say the law mostly clarifies powers the government already had for decades. What do you mean by that?
So the constitution that was adopted in the Mandela years in 1996 said that the state must redistribute land and restore it to Black South Africans who were unfairly dispossessed during apartheid. That process has been very slow. And up to now, the South African government has gone to landowners and offered to buy out property at market prices, even though the Constitution clarified that it could expropriate where needed. This current new law says that where it is unable to acquire land through other means, the state may take the property in question, a claimed farm, for instance, or a portion of a farm. And if the owner is not willing to sell at market price, it may expropriate that. And it should pay compensation that a court deems is just and fair, which may or may not be at market price. So it is taking a constitutional right and it's operationalizing it in law. And what this means is that in the future, the state could choose to depart from the norm of paying market level compensation. It hasn't happened yet. And in fact, most commentators, including my own institute, which has been following this for 30 years, have severe doubts as to whether the South African government has any intention to actually implement this law. So far, it is a law that is required by our constitution, but it has been equated, I think, in the public mind in parts of the West and among some of the white supremacist groups globally. It has been equated with the Zimbabwean land reform, in which white farmers were kicked off their land without compensation or without any kind of legal process. So in my mind, this is a lot of smoke around something which has not happened.
So why do we now have these dozens coming over here claiming to be refugees?
Dozens.
President Trump is calling this process racial persecution. He also says there's race-based genocide in South Africa because of this law. What's your response to that?
It's entirely fallacious. There is no data to back up the claim that there is a white genocide underway in South Africa. Last year, in the first 9 months, there were 19,000 murders, of which...
Bro, this is how you know. This is how you know, bringing it back to Israel, but like, this is how you know, in the United States of America, if you defend Israel, you are classified as white. And certainly a bunch of Jewish people that also defend Israel would be classified under white. Because in the eyes of white supremacists, your personal feelings being hurt, okay, in the interest of like starting the conversation of reparations that are long overdue is akin to genocide, okay? Like, that's it. These guys are literally saying like, no, this is a genocide because like the government wants to give me market rate for my fucking farmland so they can engage in redistributive policies. Even the legal action that they're taking that is constitutionally the right, that in and of itself is considered genocide. Ending the lives and livelihood of virtually every single fucking Palestinian, on the other hand, that's nothing. That's just like righteous. That's happening. And it's good that it's happening. And you better not call it genocide, because if you do, that's actually like a genocide to me, a guy who wants to defend this position without any sort of scrutiny whatsoever. I'm not super familiar with the Zimbabwe land reforms, but in theory, if they were to like win a fucking war, let's say, against the colonial apparatus, then it is their fucking right to do whatever the fuck they want with the land. Of course, they've been punished relentlessly from. They've been punished relentlessly for that crime, as Haiti was as well. And therefore, people love pointing to like the current living circumstances of Zimbabwe to be like, see, this is what happens when white people exchange hands and give ownership over stolen land back to black people. But, you know, at the end of the day, every single cruel action taken against countries that have been able to successfully win back their own land is met with a series of sanctions and unimaginable amounts of punishment.
Only 50 took place on farms, and most of the data shows that less than 10% of the murders on farms were of white landowners. The vast majority of those murders were of poor black farm workers. So, you know, there is this narrative. It's not the first time it has been promoted. South African right-wing organizations are very well networked with similar organizations in the US, in Australia, in parts of Europe. And have promoted this idea that white Afrikaners are subject to persecution. As you can see from the images scrolling right now, These are people who are mostly middle class or lower middle class, who have not had their lives directly threatened. It's in many senses, what is happening here is an existing privileged group within South Africa is claiming a need for asylum status in the US. It's become the laughingstock of South Africa. Online memes are going mad.
Yeah, everyone is making fun of the fucking Boers that came in because they're hilarious. They are such perfect American piglets, dude. And part of what I wanted to talk about, and the reason why I'm like, well, this is not necessarily the worst thing to happen to South Africa. Like, can you imagine if some other country took some of our most annoying white supremacist hogs? Like, if Canada tomorrow was like, oh, we're offering safe haven to all of the American neo-Nazis, I'm sorry, I wouldn't be too upset. Okay? Like, especially if there was a constitutional clause that dictated that like 40 acres and a mule would be taken from historic slaver families and given to black people in this country. And then those historic slaver families and neo-Nazis that were very frustrated about this reality were like, well, we're going to leave then. I wouldn't be fucking holding my breath. I wouldn't be like, no, don't do that. I'd be like, yeah, great. Go to Canada. Fucking awesome. Of course, this is not comparable because there are far more American neo-Nazis and American historic slaver families are far larger in numbers than the amount of white South Africans who are complaining about this constitutionally protected right. That's the reason why the total amount of refugees that have come in so far is 59. A handful, a dozen, a couple dozen South Africans. But I need to, what is this? A man who was married to a white Afrikaner speaks.
The South Africans, refugees.
Okay, sure, we'll do that. A white South African woman speaks on the group of South African refugees that have just entered the USA. Take a listen. Yeah, everybody's dunking on the Afrikaners because, like, it's literally the same. If our hogs were going to Canada because they were claiming that they were being oppressed because there's, like, black people around, like, what kind of commentary would you have? Right? You would make fun of them. You'd be like, oh, look at these fucking idiots. They're leaving. Like, I would celebrate that. Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah, they're going to fit right in Texas. Buc-ee's, sliced beef sandwich, state-issued Cummins, dually, 3 increasingly larger and louder sons trailing behind him, making sticky walking sounds, red wife bankrupting the family via mobile game microtransactions. These are the people we want. Exactly. Exactly. Like, look at this guy. Bro. Like, dude, it is so funny to be like, these guys are experiencing genocide. Yeah, maybe because he ate all the neighbors' food, dog. What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, it turns out he was eating everyone else in the neighborhood's fucking grain supply, dude. Fuck you mean? Holy fuck. Bro, he's already American. Look at him. No, I know they are. That's why it's so fucking perfect. Turns out he's an oppressed refugee who owns a granite mine. So this is Charles Kleinhaus, granite mine director, South Africa. Afrikaner. Okay. You know what's really funny about this South African refugee that is escaping a fucking genocide, owner of a goddamn granite mine? Here is what this South Africans' takes were. Remember when the Trump administration was saying, like, the Department of Homeland Security is going to stop scary ideas from crossing the border, and then they had to delete that tweet because everyone was like, what the fuck do you mean you're going to stop ideas from crossing the border? Ironic, by the way, because they certainly are prosecuting ideas, or trying to, as we all know from the events that unfolded in the past couple of days. Okay? But the Trump administration has started the process of looking at the social media profiles of the people that are letting into the country and trying to use anti-Semitism as a cudgel. Like if you say anything pro-Palestinian, you're branded as an anti-Semite, you're branded as a dangerous person, and you're not allowed into the country. Whereas it seems like, I guess, the fucking... I guess they just didn't look at this guy's social media profile. Here it is, Aaron Reichlin Melnick. Wow, the Trump admin said they will review social media and deny immigration benefits to people saying anti-Semitic claims. They're even trying to deport people with green cards on alleged claims of anti-Semitism. Anyway, here's a tweet from an Afrikaner. They flew here on Monday. I'm going to try to do my best South African accent here, okay? Fuck, I can't do it. I wish I could do a better South African accent. Let me think. So much for the tolerant left. Yeah. Don't do it, bro. What? No, shut up. I don't think it's good, but I'm trying. I'm trying my fucking best, okay? I'm trying my freaking best. Yeah. Yeah. The only time I'm ever oppressed as a white South African is when Hasan tries to do a South African accent. Jews are untrustworthy and a dangerous group. They are not God's chosen. No, that's fucking awful. That's awful. I can't do it. They're not God's chosen like they believe they are. Where's the temple? That must be their concern. Leave us alone. We all believe in God of Abraham, Moses, and Jacob. I almost said something ugly. ... So, workshop that shit before you say it on main, bud. Yeah. Now, don't worry, Berman Jewish databank peruser, who I saw this at first, because, by the way, that person deleted their fucking profile. Don't worry. We identified that he actually is a good type of anti-Semite. God will save Israel. He always has. Jews are unsavory and untrustworthy. Okay, they're agents of Satan, but also God will save Israel. He always has. This man, I'm sorry, is the perfect Amerifat. Okay, this man was ordained by God to live in Dallas. You can never tell me that this is not already an American. He just happened to be born in a fucking different country. This is literally verbatim the average Dallas, Texas mega church attendee on any given fucking Sunday who drives his lifted pickup truck to the parking lot of the Dallas mega church, and you look at his fucking pickup truck, and in the back it has truck nuts, and on the one side a Blue Lives Matter sticker, and on the other side a Save Israel sticker. And you're like, how the fuck did this happen? I heard you say Jews have horns and tails, but you love Israel, because that is how evangelical Zionism works. Okay? This is it. This man was destined to live in the United States of America. We are betraying his God-given right to live on U.S. soil. It does not matter if he's brought here, exported as a pawn to claim that South Africa is doing a genocide against white people or whatever. This man had to live in America. Okay? That's it. He was, yes, assigned American at birth. Yeah, instead of driving a Toyota Hilux or a Ford Ranger, he'll be driving a lifted Chevy Silverado, 2,500, averaging 12 miles per gallon. Also, I love the first tweet because he's like, I almost said something ugly. Bro, you said Jews are untrustworthy. What more? Like, what do you mean? I almost said something ugly. Yeah, white South Africans granted refugee status by Trump. We are very conservative people. I doubt that we will vote anything else than Republican Party. We are also trying to keep the Bible in our schools and stop this wokeness problem. And we want to contribute in such a way that America would just want more Afrikaners to come over. In South Africa, they hate white people even if you're born here and your parents, and it is part of the same continent as Israel. Another farm attack. They put his face in hot water. It's happening in South Africa. Killed a boar, killed a farmer. It's happening in South Africa. But yeah, don't worry. He is deeply anti-Semitic, deeply anti-woke, and also simultaneously, he is very pro-Israel. What's so funny is that this specific kind of white South African hates speaking English. They fucking hate English white South Africans too. Yeah. An introductory guide into HAARP and global weather modification. He believes in the weather machine. Here's what the gentleman posted on October 7th. If he were a Harvard or Columbia student, he'd be in ICE prison in Louisiana. Clash between Palestinians and Israeli forces in East Jerusalem. Jews spitting on Christians. Ami's real high. But also, oh, it's so good. Pro-Israel, anti-Semitic, anti-woke, believes in conspiracy theories. Tell me this motherfucker wasn't ordained by God to live in a fucking Dallas-Fort Worth suburb. Tell me a lie. He is perfect. Oh my God. Yeah. Meanwhile, Elon Musk has been trying to also massage the narrative by dialing back the woke that Grok has, and in the process, he basically force-fed Grok to constantly fucking talk about the white genocide in South Africa. Grok suddenly can't stop bringing up white genocide in South Africa. Okay, Max Scherzber is getting paid this year. Okay, Grok, is this accurate, says Danny Sawyer. The claim of white genocide in South Africa is highly debated. Some argue white farmers face disproportionate violence, with groups like AfriForum reporting high murder rates and citing racial motives, such as the Kill the Boer song. However, South African courts, even then, they couldn't actually make it. They couldn't actually, make Grok not be fucking woke. Because there's dual interest here, okay? On the one hand, you want the fucking AI to spit out whatever you want it to spit out so you can engage in brainwashing. But on the other hand, the data you trained it on, to the best of your ability, needs to be consistent with reality. Otherwise, the AI doesn't fucking work. So, of course, unfortunately for many, despite the capacity for AI to hallucinate with regular frequency, if it's trained to try to be as truthful as possible, it's still going to be kind of fucking woke. That's it. The reason why I always tell people not to rely on AI like this is that in spite of the fact that reality happens to be fucking woke, okay? Grok, do it jiggle. I'm not sure what you mean by do it jiggle. Could you clarify what you're referring to? I'm here to provide a clear, neutral response based on truth seeking. Your butt. Hey, let's keep it chill. My butt's not up for debate. On the serious side, claims about white genocide in South Africa are... This is Julius Malema. He's a black nationalist and supposed socialist. He's a grifter, but only won like 15%. Yeah, the EFF. I know. For context, Kill the Boer was an anti-apartheid struggle song. However, it became repoliticized when a former presidential candidate sang it at his rallies. One of our courts now says it's a hate crime to sing it, but some Afrikaners will still complain it's genocide. Yeah, I know. I'm very familiar with the EFF and what happened with Julius Malema. Everybody loves talking about white genocide because of this video. Shocking video shows South Africa's black party singing "Kill the Boer, kill the white farmer." This is all downstream from the rotten... Here. This is all downstream from the rotten secular religion of wokeness and CRT plaguing America today. You have been warned. Watch. He issued a fucking anti-woke trigger warning, by the way. Also, he said black party. There are some swagged out white boys in the AFF too, by the way. It's fucking awesome. Anyway, wasn't there like polling results that came out from the election, and people were going through it, people were scouring the voting logs, and they found like deep white enclaves where there was like one guy that ended up voting for the EFF. Also, South Africa is 90% black. Every fucking party is the black party, dumbass. What the fuck? It's literally like looking at Israel and being like, why are all these parties Jewish? Like, what do you mean? Israel is such a Jewish supremacist state that the fucking parties that still have Ashkenazi Jews in them that are anti-Zionist parties are declared Arab parties, okay? Yeah, it's like saying Jews control the media in Israel. Say that anywhere else and you're anti-Semitic. Say that in Israel, it's just a reality. Yes, the Jews do run Israel, okay? Oh, fuck.